Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Global Perspectives 2022, Transforming Civil Society Futures. My name is Miriam Niehaus and I'm the head of programs here at the International Civil Society Center. We are the ones that are bringing this conference to you. Today, we want to explore those possible futures for civil society and what it is that we as practitioners need to do so that we achieve the desirable futures. So throughout the day, you will have the chance to join several panels on more generally the future of our sector, on how we need to embed futures thinking in our defense of civic space and civil society operating space, how we can foster more inclusive digital development, and what future models for civil society cooperation beyond the North-South binary look like. Further, you'll have the chance to drop into our open house sessions throughout the day to learn more about the Center's projects, as well as about the global standard for CSO accountability and their partnership. And it is actually that global standard that you will hear about more now, and how actually dynamic accountability can bolster resilience in the civil society sector.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Here we are to talk about the global standard and how the global standard can be a tool to preserve, promote, and expand civic space. When it comes to localization, the sector has been talking a significant amount of time about it, but the practical use of the term has changed as we reflect on what it really means. When we talk about accountability, that also impacts on how are we accountable, to whom are we accountable, what should be taken into consideration when organizations self-regulate. Then this is essential, no, to localize, to think about the specific context. As I said, today we will talk about how organizations or networks have used the global standard for CSO accountability to advance or start their accountability journey, focusing on how the experts of their own context can use it and adapt it, being very mindful that one size does not fit all. The global standard aims to guide a tailor-made process on how to embrace accountability in a dynamic way that builds trust by meaningful relationships, horizontal ones, continuous ones, that every voice is heard and these different powers are rebalanced, using them in a more effective and just way. So when the global standard was created, flexibility was one of the main priorities of it, recognizing, as I said, that one size does not fit all, but trying to be holistic, being mindful of what do you do internally in your organization, but also externally with other stakeholders, taking into consideration the interaction of these different stakeholders. And here we are with our speakers here that have used the global standard, adapted, and now we're here to learn from their experiences. So if I may ask to introduce yourself and what your organization focuses on. Jocelyn, would you like to start?
Sure thing. Thanks, Elisa, and hi, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Condon. I am the Chief Operating Officer at the Australian Council for International Development, or ACFID, and we are the membership-based body here in Australia representing organisations that do international development and humanitarian work overseas.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Maria?
Well, thank you, Elisa, for this introduction, and thanks to the International Civil Society Center in Accountable Now for this invitation. Well, my name is Maria Vishinova, and I'm the Communication and Information Officer at the Balkan Civil Society Development Network, BCSDN, which in fact is a network of 14 civil society organizations in the Balkans. We have members from the 6 Western Balkan countries, including Turkey, as well as members from the EU Balkan countries, such as Slovenia, Bulgaria, and Romania. Well, our work, our mission is to empower the civil society and influence European and national policies towards a more enabling environment, and our work is founded on 4 postulates. First is the monitoring of the enabling environment and reporting on it. The second is capacity building for civil society development, where we base the concept of civil society accountability. After that, representing or better positioning the voice of the Western Balkan CSOs in front of the EU agenda. And finally, the leading donor CSO conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Ciale?
Hi, everyone. Greetings from the Pacific. I'm Emelini Siale-Lolahia. I'm the Executive Director of the Pacific Islands Associations of NGO, short for PIANGO. We are in regional platform of national umbrella NGOs across the Pacific. We are present in 24 countries and territories in the Pacific, quite a wide network of umbrella NGOs. We refer to them as National Liaison Unit because of the role that we are expecting our members to take, which very much around creating an enabling environment, give space to the voice of civil society so that they are part of the public policy decision-making, making sure that when we talk about civil society, they are part of the decision making, they are part of identifying what are the key priorities from the community, that the resources of government should direct it in terms of public services. So we do a lot of national consultation, dialogue, and it's quite an amazing way of work when we are using accountability lens to look into how we hold ourselves accountable at the same time hold the decision makers accountable and the policy officials, making sure that they put the well-being and the life of people in the center of development. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for accepting the invitation to share your valuable experiences. So Maria, let me ask you, when we talk about these different kind of accountability, what are we really referring to? Is it this one that the global standard underpins?
Well, thank you so much for your question, Elisa. Well, being accountable and what does accountability means? Well, in my opinion, it is firstly it is about bringing trustful and transformational relationships, especially with the people we work for and with, which means for our members, partners, local communities, governments, and other stakeholders. This is also correlated with the meaningful engagement of these stakeholders and including their voices in our actions, and of course, responding to their needs. In this way, we build a stronger image in front of the people we represent, but also to the partners, donors, as well as governments, presenting us as a trustworthy and reliable actor. Mostly it's about also how we invest in transformational relationships, but also how we are prone to be adaptable to the changes in the society. That's how, and that's why we should, accountability also means to be prone to bring a positive impact about what we do, how we do, and for who we do, which is based on investing ourselves in the working relationships that we have with our co-workers, members, partners, etc. And this is also correlated how we are becoming aware of our advantages and things that we are best in it, and as well as our disadvantages, and learning how to overcome them. And as you can see, this is different type of accountability, and it doesn't relate to either to upward accountability that in fact it's connected with acknowledging the donors and governments have the power in more traditional sense over CSOs, and neither to the downward accountability, which is a call for shift the power dynamics between CSOs and the people they work with and for, bringing them to the forefront, but it's correlated with this dynamic accountability, which is founded on establishing a more horizontal and more mutual approach among the stakeholders. And this dynamic type of accountability, especially it is recognized in our work by putting people at the core of our actions and representing people's interests. It is also about investing in feedback and closing the feedback loop and choosing the right feedback mechanism, etc. And of course, leading dialogues about power sharing and power shift. This is how we like include the global standards and its 12 commitments in our work. The 12 global standards commitments are included in our basic documents, in our code of conduct, especially, or after that in our statute, in our other strategic documents, etc. But not only that, it is more how we use the global standard in a way we communicate with our constituencies. It is about how we respect the human rights. We invest in gender equality. We build our relationships based on ownership and power sharing. And it is how we invest in people's knowledge and skills and provide and include our members, the stakeholders in the decision-making processes. Thank you so much. I think that I covered and everything.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maria. It was a very comprehensive answer, and then also give us the real picture on how this really moves away from traditional accountability, and it is not about due diligence, but this other process that gives you a ground for horizontal relationships and partnering in a different way in the sector, no? So in the case of ACFID and Piango, how this partnership happened and how has this dynamic accountability has been lived, as well as then how did you use it to either adapt your code or use a new one?
Maybe if I start off, Ciale, and I'll let you get into the details. But so ACFID, we were very pleased to be a founding partner of the Global Standard because this initiative is something that we saw a real need for. And that's to say that lots of our members are actually signatories to all kinds of codes around the world and all kinds of different standards and forms of regulation. And something that was a very deliberate purpose when we originally started drafting the global standard amongst there would have been 9 or 10 founding partners at the time, was that it would exist as a reference standard. So something that we could all use as a tool to align our existing frameworks to and or update or see what else might be needed to fit around them to make them make sense, and also to be able to be explained across different contexts, but for our stakeholders to be able to translate which parts apply to other parts of the world as well. So once that standard was launched, which was incidentally at International Civil Society Week in Suva in 2017, we were really pleased to be able to revive a conversation with Piango that was not the first time that we had talked about how this was something that the Pacific was invested in, and that there was actually already quite a few minimum standards and codes operating in the Pacific. But again, that there was this appetite to understand how to align better with international frameworks and create something that existed as a way to contextualize against something that was internationally recognized as well. And from ACFID's perspective, and the activity that has taken place over the last 3 years in terms of bringing about a Pacific framework is not really, it's not us. We've been pleased to be able to facilitate a conversation and be present in documenting what's happened. But the most interesting thing that I have observed and colleagues have observed from ACFID is that these conversations aren't new to civil society, and they're not new to civil society in the Pacific either. It's really actually putting a framework around what we already know is there and creating structure and a way to explain what is already happening in practice. I'll let Ciale talk more about the partnership. I'm sure she has more to share.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I'm also a new actor to the Pacific Islands Association of NGOs, not in the sense that I'm new to the civil society. I have been the executive director of the Civil Society Forum of Tonga, which is the member of Piango in Tonga, for some time before I took up this role in Piango. So when I started with the organization, it's Piango is 30 years old plus organization. So as Jocelyn said, existing relationship, existing network, doing similar kind of work with members in countries. But what I found is that that we had perhaps approached our attempt to have an accountability mechanisms within Piango was from a kind of a project-based approach, where it was part of a funding from a donor that we should have, you know, a code of minimum standard. And Piango is really clearly articulated they will learn from ACFID because they have a history of working in the Australian sector, civil society sector, in terms of their ACFID code. And so it was quite supported from the donors that are giving us resources. And so many attempt our code of minimum standard become an output of project. And so when I pick up the role and start having the conversation with the ACFID, Jocelyn and Emily, and they talk about the global standard as a reference point, it felt so right in terms of the reform that we had in our mind about shifting from project-based to much more of a you know, vision for the organization, giving us a purpose. What is it really that we want to see change, and the role that we play in making that happen? And so when we were talking about the global standard and the whole accountability framework, it's you know, it's inspiring. It's like not transactional. It's not like us talking about how much money this is, how much money that we need to go down to community and do this work. It's really remove the funding conversation to a much more of a purpose, a vision. What do we want to inspire people to? And so it has really changed the dynamic, and you find that you can influence people to come along and share their perspective on what does accountability looks like. And so in terms of our work with ACFID, we, as Jocelyn has said, they facilitated the conversation. We bring our people to the discussions. And we did it in different phases. We said, okay, let's start with our team at the Secretariat, because we cannot front up with our members by talking about different things. So a lot of conversation has happened with our team. Unfortunately, it was during the COVID time. So a lot of webinar like now. And I must say that I'm so excited that Emily is here in Fiji with our members for the first time to do this kind of conversation face to face. And our first time today has to really bring that into perspective, where we're starting talking about we need to have a specific principles in terms of development effectiveness, because that's the underlying work that we want to build on accountability. Is how do we see ourselves as development actors in our own right as civil society, and claim that right. And by claiming that right, we know that we need to organize ourselves and be accountable, so that when we put it out forward to our other partners, we said, we may not be perfect in what we do, we may not know what we do sometimes, but we know exactly what it looked like to have an organization that is use accountability as a lens to start assessing how we do things. So that is not, and one of the things, if I could just, wrap up my response to that questions, is about how we have seen the accountability framework and the work that we do is presented in a way that is a trust building process, yeah, where a lot of time we see accountability as a sometimes it's a confronting concept, where we are out there to make sure that we assess people. Is there anyone that is not doing well? And then we have to make sure that we kind of bring them and police them so that they put them right, that this is how they should behave. But it's a mechanism that when you start looking at it from a different perspective, that we are all in here together, then you started to see the relationship and the trusting component comes out from people, because the beauty of the accountability is that we work with people, and this is how we want to influence how they're behaving in certain way, how their perspective in how they see development, and how we see ourselves related to each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sia, and thank you so much for stressing that point of that being a process, a ritual one, the one that builds trust, the one that carries reflection as we go along, and that is a never-ending one, right? Because the reflection will continue to be, and the interactions will continue to be, and it's desired to continue in this process. So we listen, learn, and react to the learnings that we gather along the way. So talking about learnings, well, before talking about learnings, just very, very, very quick, Maria, if you could share a little bit of what BCSDN also did with their members on the work on the global standard, and how it was useful for the members to advance the dynamic accountability. If you can just give us like a quick example on one or two of your members.
Well, yes. Well, thank you. As I mentioned, BCSDN is composed of 14 civil society organizations across the Balkans, but we had the pleasure to share our knowledge on accountability, and especially on dynamic accountability, with two of our members. The Macedonian Civil Society, the Macedonian International Civil Society Center from Macedonia, and the Partners Albania for Change and Development from Albania. Actually, before going deep into the national context, first I have to mention a bit about how BCSDN has developed its own code of conduct. And in fact, we have developed our code of conduct in 2018. The code was published in 2018, and in fact, the global standard helped a lot to us in order to develop the code as it is today, because we had like 2 years of discussions and consultations, and going back and forth regarding how we should construct the code. And the global standard experience helped us deliver the code, which is based on basic postulates and commitments on how we will hold ourselves accountable, transparent, and legitimate actor. In that way, like 1 year ago, or 2 years ago, we transmitted the knowledge to our members, to Partners Albania and MCAC, so that they can learn from our best practices, which are like founded on the global standard and experience, and share the global standard knowledge on national level. At first, they started like doing accountability mapping in their own countries, and after that they organize people-to-people events, mentoring, capacity knowledge events, trainings, information sharing through their channels, etc. The local organizations got involved. A lot of really grassroots organizations got interested in the global standard work, and thanks to the global standard, these groups they created informal groups of the CSOs on national level that raised into like groups that after that were the founders of the leaders in the process of the creation of the two national codes, the Civil Society Code in North Macedonia, delivered last year, and the Code of Standards for the Albanian CSOs. They're like similar but different in the way that the Macedonian Civil Society Code is more voluntary and open, which means that every organization willing to be a part of the code can join, no matter in which level of accountability it is. While the Albanian Civil Society Code is a bit different, the organizations are going through a process of self-learning and evaluation through a committee that decides which organization will be a part of the code, but however, it motivates the organization to do the self-assessment and to invest in themselves. Yes, and however, now we are together with them and with the global standard, we are continuing in their efforts to promote this code and to invest in the civil society organizations to like to be deeply involved into to practice the accountability knowledge on local level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Now we can have like 3 different examples on how the global standard attends the needs of the context, the people that are using it, and then can adapt it and use it their way, being sure that dynamic accountability is at the core of what they're doing. And as Ciale was pointing out, being sure that the practices are like this reflections on the development actors and how do we interact with each other, being mutually accountable, not as a police, but as a way of caring for each other's needs and being responsive of them. So thank you so much for this journey that you just shared with us. And then I wanted to ask and be a bit more specific on what the results. I know that it's very, very recent that you started this development of the codes and the different standards or commitments, but have you already been able to see some of the benefits internally to the networks or organizations, or also externally when you interact with other stakeholders on, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how are we doing things, and this has changed the way that we relate with each other, kind of. So I would be interested to know if it's already been useful internally or externally. I don't know if Ciale, you would like to go first on this one.
Very much so, and I think this is because we are using our standard from kind of a family approach, because it is kind of the sister affiliated member of Piango, and our members within our Pacific community, they have been with us, high and low, different challenges time, and so the appetite, as Jocelyn has said, to see how we need to reform our practices has been there, but as I said earlier, it's often being driven by project. I think this is the first time that we had taken it as much of a an organization is bringing the platform together, to having it together. And then because of the recognitions of the ECFID code, everyone has accepted ECFID to be the expert to support their work, but not an outsider. And I think this is where I find that is the conversation we had. It's easier because it's like an internal family business. We're coming together and agreed together and said, let's find out how this works. And then through the support of ECFID, a lot of conversation has happened. And because in our Pacific, we are one of the many from the regional geography that we had not good record of managing aid in the Pacific. And so the conversations around accountability have always been influenced by due diligence, by donor coming in to measure our performance, our system, does it measure up to the expectation? And we often find that our level of accountability has been measured by donors' expectation. And it has been around for a long time. And so when we come in with the idea and said, let's do this ourselves, let's try to see how we can develop a toolkit and self-assessment mechanism that can help us assess our work. And then we invite the donors, we invite government, we invite others to say, we are doing this. Can you get along with us and find how we can improve our system? And so that has really put a different framing in the work that we do. And the interesting thing that we have just worked with ECFID in developing our Pacific CSO framework, and now we are doing developing the toolkit to be the assessment toolkit. We have done 8 so far, and so we are having our council in a week's time. And what we have done now is using the aid of our members that has gone through our toolkit to self-assess ourselves. And what we would like to have is provided as a data baseline to our council. And our council means all representatives of the 24 countries are here in Fiji. And so this is the highest of our governance structure of Piango. So we are excited to present this back to the council and say, we have assessed 8 of our members using the toolkit that we develop ourselves with the support of ECFID and the funds that comes from the Global Standard Secretariat, and challenged them and said, these are the things that are coming out strongly. And the interesting thing that has come out, if we could pick one that we can already assess where the trend's going, is the fact that our policies, how we have human resources policy, financial policy, all of that, it seems like that we have all of them. But it's in one corner while our practice on the other side. And so already it's telling us, giving us a sense of where has it been. It's because every time the donors come and say, you have to have a child protection policy. Okay, we go to the net, look it up, cut here, put it here, and then it's the tick off. Yeah. While we have all that line up and all look pretty, we do our practice a totally different way, the way we always have wanted to do. And so that is a huge gap. And the interesting thing is that the toolkit is also giving us why we are operating as such. So we find that it's not something that we find that we are offended by the data presenting itself, because we seem to just look at it and laugh and say, yeah, exactly, that's what we do. And so it's so different if you have an outsider consultant or someone outside as a company to come and do the assessment, because it oftentimes you find offended because you are being put in, your weaknesses and your challenges are being presented, exposed in a way. But when you are doing it in-house, you feel like that you are much more accommodating the fact that actually it does not present to us any data that we should have, that should be surprised with, because that's exactly what happened, you know. But so the exciting part is that we're going to present our bit of work with the support of the Global State Secretariat and also with ECFID to our product members by presenting the aid that they had taken the assessment. So the toolkit is not set in stone. It's still complicated, as we had wanted everything to be covered. So we are still in a prioritization process, but at the same time, it can be used. And as you have said in the beginning, is an evolving, because the whole work that we do about accountability is not about projects, it's about people. How do you hold people accountable? How do you keep that relationship? How do you build that trusting relationship so they don't feel like that we are being targeting them when we want to propose improvement in how we do our practice? But we can be 101% in our lineup of all of our evidence of policies that we had printed beautifully and line up on the shelf, and then our practice is totally on the other side. So I just want to share that because it's an exciting time for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ciali, and congratulations already for the job done. And as you said, no, the very artificial way of policies being written and put it in a drawer, it's nothing to do with dynamic accountability, all the opposite. We want people to be there, people that are using the policies, the one that are creating them, questioning, reflecting. So this is very exciting for us. And then, as you said, it also gives a different framing on how you establish these relationships with other stakeholders, power stakeholders as well, and gives you a way to say, this is how we're accountable. This is really what's happening. So it does preserve, promote, and expand civic space for sure. So thank you so much for the experience. And then Maria, same thing for you. Real quick, how do you think that BCSDN, but also your partners, have benefit from having the global standard, maybe with power stakeholders? I know that you've used it in different ways. And then probably I'll jump then to Jocelyn to ask the same on these power stakeholders relationships. Is there anything that you can share with us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first I will share internally, but also externally. Internally, in a way that we strengthen the relationship with our members. We learn a lot that we should focus always including them in the process of decision making, in a way that they will have ownership in the way that we are making our decision, and it works a lot. In that way, you also gain recognition not only within the members but also within the stakeholders. Internally, we have also invested in our feedback mechanism, and thanks to the global standard, in fact, and thanks to the global standard partners individually, we learned how to close the feedback loop and choose the right feedback mechanism. But externally, there are different stories. At first, we thanks to our let's say knowledge and information sharing, as well as constant advocacy actions on regional level, but also international. One of the recent developments is the recognition of the global standard in the new EU guidelines. Well, the new EU guidelines or DGNIR guidelines for support for civil society in the enlargement region 2021-27 are essential documents for promoting and enabling environments and supporting CSO capacities and their role in developing in the development of Western Balkans and Turkey in the enlargement process. And the recognition was a very important thing for us because why? Well, referencing the global standard, it acknowledges the EU recognition for the need for capable, transparent, and accountable CSOs, which operations, in fact, will contribute to the overall civil society development in the region. However, this recognition speaks a lot because it manifests, as I said previously, our efforts to promote the incorporation of accountability commitments of global standard and essential international programs and documents correlated to development effectiveness and effective civil society operations and enhance civic space not only regionally but also globally. Well, the inclusion of the global standard in the guidelines is an additional indication of the relevance and the value of the global standard that it has been already referenced by the Open Government Partnership or OGP during 2021 in their international calls for action in supporting the civic space and civil society in general, as well as the OECD DAC recommendation on enabling environment for civil society development, cooperation in humanitarian assistance, adopted also last year, if I'm not wrong. Finally, this recognition of the global standard in the new EU guidelines is not only considered as an endorsement by the EU, which is one of the external actors, not only donor, that we are like oriented our actions to, but it is also international recognition and inspiration for civil society in the enlargement countries and beyond, everywhere across the globe, to change the way they practice accountability within the sector. I believe that CSOs could, let's say, also use this opportunity to their own advocacy and inspire other initiatives with other CSOs, governments, donors, to further invest in their accountability efforts and commitments and expand the civic space and empower civil society. Another actor, thanks to the global standard, in fact, we have also strengthened the partnership not only within the members but with other stakeholders, partners, CSO partners across the region, especially. And the global standard, I mean, in the accountability component, is also a part of our regional civil society development hub, developed in 2019, thanks to which we delivered regional and ad hoc grants to CSOs and networks in the Western Balkans. And we share this our accountability journey and all the knowledge that we have from the global standard. We also connected the global standard to their programs and projects. And with an honor, I would like to mention two regional networks that thanks to the grants that they received based on their efforts on accountability and willingness to invest in their accountability programs. One of the network developed some of the most important strategic documents, because here we're talking about an informal network, and the network get like the knowledge and experience how to strengthen and how to institutionalize their practices, let's say, and how to formalize them. And also they also like did the strategic planning, their initial phase of functioning, while the other network, thanks especially to the experience shared and the research shared, especially the BCSN Code of Conduct and the 12 accountability, global standard accountability commitments, they created their accountability standards I'm happy to share this information with you and their standards. I think that you'll find synergies between their standards and ours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you so much for this way of showing how funding accountability is investing, as Cielo was saying, not accountability as a project, but really lived accountability. And this is part of what you were saying, and how this is from the European Union, OGP, but also to informal networks useful to start working in a different way. And yeah, Jocelyn, I would go back to you and also ask you more or less the same question on the power holders. Considering, as Maria said, no power holders, it can be different powers that you play. Informal networks have tremendous power, as well as governments, donors. So any stakeholder that you have the relationship with, that you can share how it has been useful. I know that the ACFID was involved in the OECD that recommendation conversations, as well as with your own government. But yeah, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, I think that everything that's been said is entirely correct on this front. And yes, so ACFID was able to work with the Australian government when they were chairing the OECD DAC recommendation process. And so, I mean, it's obviously hugely helpful that the reference standard that is called out at Pillar 3 is the global standard. The OECD gets behind the global standard, and that's because that it is a comprehensive civil society standard, and that Pillar 3 is really talking about encouraging adherence to that recommendation to support self-regulation as an important tool for enabling civil society space. And self-regulation is about recognizing the authenticity that comes behind a self-generated initiative when CSOs are speaking to and describing for themselves what accountability looks like in practice. So, but I think it's also quite important to call out in the power conversation that something that particularly the initiative that we've worked on with Piango has helped ACFID with is recognising and using some of our own power as Australian civil society in these conversations, and being very, very clear in what we can do in terms of amplifying the voice of Pacific civil society into conversations, particularly with bilateral donors in the Australian government, to talk in real practical terms about what they could be doing if they were to take on board this recommendation, and to really sort of look in practical terms. I'd like to go full circle back to how you opened this, Elisa, about what localization can look like and what are the practical ways that we can bring that about. And the thing that we've been most pleased about is how we as Australian civil society are able to be very authentic, I think, then in a conversation that we're having with Australian government and as part of our own advocacy agenda, in saying, well, actually, Pacific civil society is several steps ahead of you. They've initiated their own self-regulation. It's already aligned to the reference standard that is called out in that DAC recommendation. I think that it gives us such a clear framework to then really sort of back that in and lay down the challenge, which is, you know, both to bilateral donors like Australia, but I also think around the world, to really back in those initiatives and get behind civil society being propositional in the space about what good practice and due diligence and the frameworks that we put around that is. And I mean, it's efficient in one sense, but it's also really good for everybody in that conversation as well, I think. So it's, yeah, I think that, yeah, the power is an interesting dynamic, but what the global standard gives us in terms of how we relate to one another and explain one another and refer to one another is actually a really interesting dynamic as well.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I think this captures very well what it's been said throughout the conversation. So that's actually beautiful reflections. And I'm very mindful of the time, and I know that we're running out of it, but I don't want to leave without asking you this last question to each of you, which is, what would be your call of action recommendation? I don't know, like highlight of what others can do to enable the environment. So this kind of dynamic that Ciale, Jocelyn, and Maria were saying, of this horizontal way of the civil society sector start acting. What would you say to the people that are listening to us? Just 1 minute each, please.
If I could start, I think my call to action is that this is such a great initiative, the global standard, and it's applicable to any situation. If I could just quickly share the work that we have now done to see how the accountability framework is feature in the development landscape. But in the Pacific, there's so highly contested climate change impact. You know, if you bring that kind of development agenda, and then we start seeing our countries going into highly debt. Yeah, majority of our countries have budget support coming from donors. So we work with the UNDP in what we call public finance management. And this accountability framework just fit in perfectly well, because it allows us to give us the confidence that we are working towards our own accountability, and that should not hold us back by calling on government on their own accountability. And their public finance management is the one that we always said, if you want to see where the power dynamics goes, follow where the money goes. And so this is on the side, is giving us that confidence that we can speak out and call on people, you know, call on the system if they are not aligning to make sure that life of people are at the center of the development. So it can be a tool where our advocacy can be strengthened. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ciale. Jocelyn?
I feel like I might have already said my piece of a call to action to the funders, but I mean, I think that the real call to action is to sort of look in practical terms for networks and organizations and for the civil society members present, is that where you actually start working with the global standard, what I found most surprising and most satisfying, I think, of doing this project, in particular with the Pacific, is that most of these things already do exist. You know, these are things that our organizations are familiar with, and we're actually talking about ways to systematize them, to reconceive of what they are capable of, and to talk in practical terms with our peer organizations about a common way of describing what that looks like. And it's actually they're really powerful conversations. Like, the process of working with the global standard is almost as important as the result of where you end up thereafter. The understanding that it generates, and the power of sort of bringing various civil society actors together around a common conversation shouldn't be underestimated. And I think that that's sort of the call to action for us as civil society, is to be initiating these conversations and to be proactive in them.
Thank you very much. Maria?
Yeah, thank you, Jocelyn, for this, and you just inspired me. Well, in this regard, I think that it is very important for CSOs to build and to create common synergies, joint synergies, in order to be their voice in their actions. And my advice is that in order to improve the external environment and to enable civil society development in shrinking civic space, and to involve in better relations both with donors and governments. I think that the shrinking space and everything requires improvement from within, which means within the CSOs, and CSOs should be like motivated to through self-evaluation to invest in their own accountability working. Well, secondly, I think that CSOs should maybe also reconsider how they in this regard how to understand how they practice accountability and its implication, resilience, trust, and impact. Thirdly, we all like through our conversation emphasized on a couple of instances that around the globe, governments use various tactics like harassment, intimidation. They create false narratives to restrict civil society activities and delegitimize their actions. But however, this should not underestimate CSOs or demotivate them, but instead should encourage them to even more invest in their own accountability and show to the governments as well as to the donors how they are accountable and how they remain open and alert despite criticism, especially in times marked by inequality, insecurity, also health crisis, climate change challenges, as well as war situation. And this is definitely also part of how they the CSO practice accountability for their constituencies and for the people they serve. Yeah, that's from my side.
Thank you so much to all. Thank you, Maria, for the, closing with this, because yeah, we need to be prepared to respond. We need to be investing because we want to be efficient in what we do, and a way to prove that we continue to be a legitimate actor in the civil society sector, and the one that, as Jocelyn was saying, can lead processes in our own context. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for encouraging everybody to have the difficult conversations, to have the process in place and continue doing it, to establish true partnerships, and also to donors for make this possible, because this kind of accountability requires a lot of resources, time, staff, and a different way of working that it's beyond the project, that Ciali was saying. So we invite you to reflect on this, and to everybody to look at the global standard, and it's an open source, so you're welcome to go and grab it, adapt it to your needs, and we're here for whatever you want. All the partners are listed there, and we also have other external partners as well. So very happy to answer any questions. Special thanks to the speakers. Hope that you continue working with the global standard. And yeah, for the rest of the participants, we hope to see you in the open house sessions that we have. Many of the partners of the global standard will be there. It's going to be throughout the day, so join us in the open house.